Welcome, dear Gothletts. Right, I will be seeing if this is working now. I did do this full podcast and then listened to it back, and it sounded awful. So we're going to try again. It won't be the same as the first time, because a lot of this I do without a script. So, this is the first episode of my new series on stories to fall asleep to, and I will be embarking on a quest to unravel the enigmatic origins of paganism. Get comfortable, grab yourself a drink, and relax into the latest podcast. I do have numerous references, and I will add all them into the description so you can peruse in your. Join me today as I delve into the annals of history to explore the dawn of this ancient and mystical faith. To understand the beginnings of paganism, we must journey back in time to the cradle of civilization. One of the earliest records of human religious expression comes from the ancient Sumerians, who inhabited Mesopotamia around 3500 BCE. It seems as always when I record podcasts my voice goes, so bear with me, it will come back when it feels like it. Mesopotamia is an old region in West Asia, which was within the Tigris-Euphrates river system, which is known today as Iraq. In their epic tales, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I'm pretty sure we've all heard that name. I can't tell you where, but yeah, I've heard it. And it reminds me of Gilgamesh from, I don't know, Smurfs. There we go. I nearly forgot their little blue creatures' names. We find traces of a rich pantheon of deities embodying natural forces and human virtues. A book by Samuel Noah Kramer, The Sumerians, Their History, Culture and Character, as a paraphrase this up. So Samuel Noah Kramer writes in Sumerians, Their History, Culture and Character, quote, the Sumerians, I'm thinking of Tolkien. The Sumerians, it doesn't sound right, so maybe I'm guessing it's right, were among the first peoples to develop a complex system of religious belief, worshipping a diverse pantheon of gods and goddesses associated with various aspects of the natural world. End quote. Civilizations flourished and empires rose and fell. The tapestry of paganism evolved and adapted, weaving together strands of cultural heritage and spiritual wisdom. In ancient Egypt, for example, the worship of gods like Osiris, Isis, and Ra reflected a profound reverence for the circles of life, death, and rebirth. The previous series is about ancient Egyptian religion, and you can find some more information on there. We do actually go into a couple of those gods and how they was relevant to the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. So Geraldine, who is a British Egyptologist and on faculty at the University of Oxford, says in her work, Egyptian Myths, a very short introduction, quote, the ancient Egyptians believed in a multitude of deities, each with its own distinct attributes and domains of influence. These gods and goddesses were worshipped through elaborate rituals and ceremonies, reflecting the profound significance of religion in Egyptian society. End quote. Again, previous podcasts go through all of this. So the Greco-Roman world, with its pantheon of gods and goddesses inhabiting Mount Olympus, provides another captivating chapter in the saga of paganism. from Zeus, the king of the gods, to Athena, goddess of wisdom, Greek and Roman mythology abounds with tales of divine intrigue and mortal heroism. Maybe we'll look more into this in the next series. What do you think? I do mention some of the Greek influences in the Egyptian religion series, the Hellenistic period. And throughout this podcast, you'll hear more about other religions coming in and assimilating, taking what they want from paganism, giving back to, what they believe. So in mythology, timeless tales of God and heroes. Edith Hamilton, who was an American educator, she wrote this. Unfortunately, she is no longer with us, but she remarks, quote, "The Greeks envisioned a universe populated by a multitude of gods and goddesses, each possessing human-like qualities, engaging in epic struggles that mirrored the trials and tribulations of mortal life." End quote. So again, everything, especially with pagan roots, just makes sense of the world. We're going to move on, and I've put a section in because paganism looks different depending where you were in the world. To understand the beginnings of paganism in the British Isles, we must journey back thousands of years to a time when the land was inhabited by indigenous tribes whose lives were intertwined with the rhythms of nature. These early inhabitants worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses associated with elements, changing seasons, and the cycles of life and death. As is much with most religion, I do feel, for me, religion is all about understanding and making sense of the world around us. One of the most prominent sources shedding light on the ancient British paganism is the archaeological record. So sites such as Stonehenge, Avebury and Silbury Hill stand as monumental testaments to the spiritual beliefs and practices of prehistoric Britain. So these ancient stone circles and burial mounds were constructed as sacred spaces for religious ceremonies and rituals, demonstrating a deep reverence for the land and its mystery. I think worldwide, Stonehenge is one of the most recognised ancient monuments associated with early religion. That's aside from obviously the Great Pyramids. So here's a quote from Dr. Ronald Hutton, and he's Professor of History at the University of Bristol. So quote, "The archaeological evidence suggests that the ancient Britons had a complex religious worldview, centered around the worship of natural deities and ancestral spirits. Stonehenge, in particular, appears to have a site of pilgrimage and communal gatherings, where people come together to honour the cycles of the sun and the changing seasons." End quote. And this is seen today. I do have a family member distant, and they do regularly go where they can to Stonehenge to celebrate the solstices, gather with others. She does drumming circles and is into crystals. I wasn't going to, and it wasn't in my first take, but I will find her details, and she's down south in the UK, and I will pop them in the podcast. So if any of you want to talk or go with like-minded people, I'll put all of that in there, because she does do some really good stuff. So another invaluable source of understanding ancient British paganism is folklore and mythology. So these stories passed down through generations offer glimpses into the beliefs and traditions of our ancestors. The tales of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, for example, they are steeped in pagan imagery and symbolism, reflecting a blend of Celtic and Christian influences. And we'll see this a lot, this blend of other influences coming into paganism. But a lot of words were passed down on. Some of the stories were written down, wrote down. I'm not very good. Adjective, whatever it is now. But again, as with everything, there is always a speck of truth in myths and legends, and also moral stories used with them. If you dissect some of the myths and legends, you will find a little nugget of truth. So, carrying on, there's a quote from Dr. Miranda Aldhouse Green. She's the Emeritus Professor of Archaeology at Cardiff University. So, quote, "Folklore and mythology provide us with rich insights into the religious practices of ancient Britain. The stories of gods and heroes, the rituals of fertility and harvest, and the sacred landscapes imbued with spiritual significance all contribute to our understandings of paganism in the British Isles." End quote. And it's saying that it can be seen again in the Egyptian podcast, that these early religions helped people understand what was happening around them in the world. So the arrival of the Romans in Britain in the 1st century BCE brought about significant changes to the religious landscape of the island. The Roman conquest introduced new deities and cults, such as the worship of Jupiter, Mars and Minerva, which coexisted along indigenous pagan beliefs. Temples dedicated to Roman gods were erected across Britain alongside sacred sites revered by the native population. Somewhere on the internet is an article for an e-zine I wrote about Samhain. I pronounced that totally wrong, I totally butchered it. You know what I'm on about, Halloween. And it includes a little bit about the integration of Christianity to existing British religion. This is also can be seen that the indigenous British people had their gods and goddesses, and although there were different names from the Romans that conquered, what the goddesses and gods did aligned together. So although there was different names, there was the same entity, and this made it a lot easier for the first Romans before Christianity to assimilate into, Britain, because the indigenous people could identify, even with a different name, the Roman deities, and likewise the Romans could identify the British deities. And it also proves that although across the world people had these beliefs, and how they interpreted the world and how they saw it was extremely similar. I digress. So this is a quote from Dr. Mary Beard, Professor of Classics at the University of Cambridge. So, quote, "The Roman occupation of Britain facilitated the exchange of religious ideas and practices between different cultures. While the Romans brought their own gods and rituals, they also adopted and adapted elements of indigenous paganism, leading to a synchronistic fusion of beliefs." End quote. And again, that's what I've just said, they adopted part. And like with all this religion, before it was wrote down, before we had the Bible, you could take the parts you like to something else which works better, which is more aligned with what you believe. And ultimately, Roman is because I've just read about the religion is your own belief in how you feel, how you interpret the world, and how you find peace. Obviously, I've my own thoughts on Christianity, and we'll come to those in a minute. So the spread of Christianity across Britain in the early medieval period marked a turning point in the history of paganism. Missionaries such as St. Augustine and St. Patrick sought to convert the pagans, its inhabitants, to Christianity, often by incorporating pagan symbols and customs into Christian rituals. The conversion process was gradual and complex, with pagan traditions persisting in various forms alongside the growing influences of Christianity. Again, another quote from Dr. Ronald Hutton. The conversion of Britain to Christianity was not a straightforward process, but rather a gradual blending of pagan and Christian elements. Many ancient pagan sites were repurposed as Christian churches, while traditional festivals and customs were assimilated into Christian celebrations. End quote. And now, this is one thing I do have a strong opinion on, and I do not believe of going to another country and forcing your views on them and taking their sacred sites and turning them into yours. And although this sounds quite gradual and quite effortless and peaceful, it wasn't. And we've had many religious upheavals in Britain throughout the years. There's Catholicism, Protestants, Church of England, all of that gory stuff. And I hate the fact that religion causes wars. I would quite happily live where we could all coincide together and have that peace. But the fact that some research I did, and people will disagree with me, the Bible was wrote as a book to subdue, to force an agenda onto people. So I view it. And if you are Christian, Catholic, I have nothing against you. You have your beliefs, and I find comfort that you find comfort in yours. I won't force my religion onto people. I don't expect other people's religion being forced onto me. I do have an interest in people's religions, just on how they perceive the world, how they find comfort in it. Ultimately, I have an interest in people, just find us fascinating. But, I digress. So we'll get back to this. So, despite the effort of Christian missionaries and the eventual establishment of Christianity as the dominant religion in Britain, traces of paganism endured in the folklore, customs and superstitions of the people. Even today, echoes of ancient pagan beliefs can be found in the landscape, the language and the cultural heritage of the British Isles, reminding us of the enduring legacy of our ancestors. It's great if you look at some of our old folklores and customs. I do have a couple of stories. Early on in the podcast I did a couple. They're there and they're passed down, and it's what keeps it alive. And, I think it's absolutely fantastic. Especially in Britain, we have this great cultural history of where we have wrote things down, where things have been spoken. And we have been invaded several times, and we've invaded other places. And, we've assimilated all these cultures. And I do feel, Britain can be this cultural hub. Where I live, I'm within 5 minutes of the Catholic Church, the Methodist Church, and the Church of England Church. It's fantastic, and I like that side by side. Now, if someone has said, the Catholic Church was there first, then they knocked it down with the Church of England Church, and they knocked it down and did the Methodist Church, I'd be upset by that. The fact I've, got all three, and everyone can worship as they wish. It makes me happy. However, it is essential to recognise that paganism is not confined to the ancient world, but endures as a living tradition in various forms to this day. Contemporary pagan movements such as Wicca, Druidry, and Heathenry draw inspiration from ancient practices while embracing modern interpretations and innovations. And I did meet a very interesting gentleman. I went to have Reiki. I will put all of his details in the description as well. And we was just talking about religion, and his name is Sifu Boogie. Hopefully I've pronounced that right. And he's a Taoist. And from what I got, and I did do a little bit of reading on this, Taoism is like the Eastern equivalent of Wiccan, and he did explain that to me. So it might be something I actually have a further look at for a podcast and go into. Does Taoism have, I hope it's the right term anyway, does it have roots in some form of paganism? Obviously the Eastern world and Oriental is very different to what I've been mentioning today, and when we think of paganism, we do think European in origin, rather than anything else. But yeah, that is one thing I may look into, but he's a very interesting guy. He does a lot of stuff. He has his own podcast. He's an empowerment coach. I will again link to some of his social medias in the comments. I digress. Let's get back on. And so Ronald Hutton also wrote The Triumph of the Moon, A History of Modern Pagan Witchcraft. And in it he observes, quote, modern paganism represents a revival and reinvention of ancient religious tradition, blending elements of folklore, mythology, and ceremonial magic to create vibrant and dynamic spiritual practices. So as we conclude our explanation of the genesis of paganism, let's ponder the enduring allure of this ancient faith. Across all ages and continents, paganism has provided solace, inspiration, and profound connection to the natural world, whether in the whispering winds of the forest or the shimmering light of the stars. The essence of paganism continues to beckon to those who seek wisdom and wonder in the mysteries of existence. And I believe this is what spoke to me. And I have mentioned in a podcast before, and I'll mention again, I was Christian, how I was brought up. I was christened Methodist or baptized. I had a stint at Catholic school. I still remember some of my time there, even though I was extremely young. And then I went to a Sunday school quite a lot. And I never felt connected to my faith. I never had comfort. I never had understanding. And it was when I had a big life-changing event and I explored, I wanted to understand more, then I found paganism. Now I will say to people I am pagan, but I feel I'm not one religion fits all, and this is where I like paganism, because I believe in different aspects of other religions. And I feel if you can find comfort, you take what you want. Now obviously there are radical groups and people out there who do that and take negative connotations and negative aspects of any of the religious texts and twist them and turn them. Ultimately I find all religious texts have this profoundness of comfort and being good to one another. Although I do find the Bible has a lot more obedience in it than other religious texts, but by the by. So for me, I like that paganism aspects of the world and the wonder, especially with global warming and natural disasters. I do believe natural disasters are more like the earth cleansing itself. If you look at history repeating its, it needs to renewal. And we don't know enough to say that, maybe scientific approach to me, because I do like my science. With this ozone layer we have, maybe the world can detect when certain levels get too high in the atmosphere of different elements, it just releases either tidal waves or earthquakes. And it's world's way of kind of rebalancing those elements that get out of whack. That's only me. I have not looked into it. It's just my thoughts. Wondering there. But I do also like the aspect of renewal and reincarnation. It really speaks to me. But that's not inherently pagan. And again, I've mentioned on other podcasts, I do believe everything has an energy, and energy doesn't dissipate. It's got to go somewhere. It stays around. So for me, that explains reincarnation, and obviously, again, it's a very logical approach. But for me, ultimately, my religion and my beliefs is what gives me comfort when I need it. It's what gives me purpose to understand the world I'm in, understand what I feel, how others feel. And I believe that's what religion should be for everyone. So thank you for joining me on this captivating journey through the origins of paganism. Remember to tune in next time as we delve into another fascinating chapter of the history. Until then, may the ancient gods and goddesses watch over you. Given what I've found researching this piece, I'll probably look at paganism originating religions throughout the world. Again, I don't know how that's going to be in a format. I'll look into it. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and even share. It really helps us out. And myself and Morgana really appreciate everyone who listens and supports us on Dead Chatty. So links to all our social media is in the description, as well as all the other links I mentioned I'd pop in there. And that's it. Take care, my Gothletts.